conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome everybody to an amazing Friday right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider, and today we're going to be digging into a few pieces of legislation. One will be Senate Bill 147, which is a bill that aims at banning sexually explicit material in front of children, performances, and everything else. Then we'll also be digging into House Bill 39. It's a veterans benefits bill that is a fascinating case of how Frankfurt can grab a hold of what is a good idea, a good bill, and destroy it and make it to where the very people who proposed it, the veterans that wanted it done, are now coming out against it. Where Frankfurt, you would think that the veterans, of all people in Kentucky, of all constituents, the veterans would be the ones that our representatives would at least listen to and not target and not listen to special interests on, but you would be mistaken. And so we'll be talking about House Bill 39 later on. We'll have Rob Holdsworth from the legislative chair for the Kentucky VFW will be coming on to discuss that bill and dig into exactly everything that's happening to it. But, as you're listening at the top, I'm going to tell you right away, make sure you're calling your state senator and telling them to vote no, to table, to get rid of House Bill 39, to make sure that that bill does not ever see itself passed into law. And like I said, we'll be really digging into why that is here a little bit later on. But before we do that, I do want to remind everybody to head on over to theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com to check out past episodes. You can follow along. If you're listening to this for the first time, you can go over there to figure out where else to listen. But without further ado, let's dig into today's show. We're going to start off with Senate Bill 147. Senate Bill 147 was heard in House committee this past week, so it's one step closer to getting passed. What does Senate Bill 147 do? Well, it takes an aim at dealing with a problem that unfortunately has become such a big problem in our modern time, and that is these sexual performances in front of children. And so we've seen it under the guise of LGBTQ stuff. We've seen it under the guise of many things. And we're seeing completely 100% inappropriate behavior in front of children in public spaces and performances at publicly funded venues and with kids at them. And it's been okay, and nobody's been doing anything because it's under the guise that, well, you can't do anything because, well, it's LGBTQ rights or some sort of thing like that. And I can give you an example of a problem I've seen. I mean, my son was like 8 years old, and we were at the July 4th parade in Lexington, and he's 8 years old, July 4th parade, and the pride float, the LGBTQ float comes by, and there's a guy wearing something that I would never, ever think of wearing. The best I could describe it would be, a thong of sorts. And it was extremely inappropriate. If anybody wore that around children normally, we would all obviously say, yeah, that's illegal. That person should be arrested for exposure to minors. Like, that's disgusting, gross behavior. But it was a part of a July 4th parade where many, many children were exposed to seeing this man's naked buttocks and obvious genitalia. And nobody did anything. And so this bill is dealing with those kinds of situations, clearly very needed. And literally Senate Bill 147 is dealing with very specifically that problem. And the bill originally kind of started out way back when, I mean last year, Senator Tishner started with this idea, and the bill's been kind of pared down, and kind of, I hesitate to use the word watered down, but certainly narrowed over time over what it can exactly deal with. So much to the point where, even Rebecca Blankenship, who is a dude that thinks he's a woman, that was the first openly elected transgender person in Kentucky. He was elected to the school board in Berea Community. So he sits on the Berea Community School Board as Rebecca Blankenship, thinks they're a woman. And even he had this to say. He said, "Thank you to Senator Tishner and Representative Nancy Tate for your hard work to protect Kentucky's kids. I don't love all the language, but Senate Bill 147 is a responsible, even-handed bill that complies with the First Amendment and treats all sexually explicit content alike." So even he, one of the biggest transgender advocates in Kentucky, one of the biggest LGBTQ advocates in Kentucky, were clearly had no problem in dealing with this situation. No problem. And so it's frankly surprising to me that in a bill that even he wouldn't have an issue with, we still have people coming out and attacking this bill. A bill aimed at just saying, hey, you can't sexually expose yourself to kids. I mean, the bill is basically at this point a zoning bill for adult businesses to ensure that minors don't have access, don't come across, strip clubs and those kinds of places are not set up too close to schools and preschools and churches and places where kids may be. It bans, drag performances, sort of. It doesn't actually ban drag performances. It bans sexual performances from taking place on public property, publicly funded event venues. It doesn't stop drag performers from performing in front of children, though, as long as they're not involved in, being nude or naked of some sort, or showing even simulated body parts of some sort, or simulating sexual acts, or doing sexual acts, or simulating them in front of people. As long as they don't do any of that, removing clothes, pretending to remove clothes, they're allowed to do it. So, and some people could ask, well, Andrew, why has it been watered down to this point? Well, a big part of the reason why is because there are no protections on the books now. So at least if we get some, that's better than nothing. And it's actually hard to define some things sometimes. Something I talked about yesterday, this grooming within schools that's not actually legal, where we've seen this many times where we have male teachers, administrators in high schools developing relationships with girls when they're 16 years old, but waiting, just showing them attention, having abnormal contact, but waiting till they're actually over the age of 18 and graduated before they graduate up into actually having physical contact with them in a more intimate setting. And that's hard to make illegal because you can't just make a law saying, hey, you can't talk to a kid outside of school, because like if it's a coach, it's coaching situation, outside of school, you pass a teacher in the grocery store, you can't make it illegal for them to say hi to one another. Right. And so that it's difficult sometimes to find things in law. So, let's deal with this problem first and then worry about the taking the problem of how do we define and pare this down. But let's just deal with this situation of adults exposing themselves to minors, which is a real problem that we have. And it's ridiculous that in our society we have those issues. So you think this would be something everybody would agree with, but you'd be mistaken. We're going to hear some of what the quote-unquote other side had to say about this legislation after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And for the break, we're digging into Senate Bill 147 discussion in committee. The bill would ban sexually explicit performances material from being as available as they are to kids. It would ban these things like strip clubs and adult stores from being within a certain distance of preschools and schools and churches. And it would also ban overtly sexual performances from being allowed to be hosted at public areas, publicly funded event venues, so on and so forth. So it really does take a stab at dealing with part of the problem. Now, keep in mind, the bill doesn't actually ban quote unquote drag shows even from taking place at public areas, at restaurants, in front of schools, or anything like that. It simply bans those same drag shows from having performers wearing clothing that is not covering things, simulating sexual acts, doing sexual performances. It still allows them to dance and sing as long as they are not crossing the line of being a sexual performance, even though I think all of us agree that drag is a sexual performance in its nature. The very nature of it is that it is a sexual performance, but it's very hard to exactly, there's things we see that we know that is wrong. That is a sexual thing, or that's wrong, but it's really hard to exactly define it in law in a way that would also pass constitutional muster. And so this bill's doing the best it can, and it's definitely something too you can build on into the future. So I want to go over, though, what people said against the bill. Because remember, before the break, I talked about one of the biggest transgender advocates, this Rebecca Blankenship, a guy thinks he's a girl, and he's on the school council for Berea schools or something, first openly transgender person elected in Kentucky. And even he had no issue with the bill. And so we look at what the people who had to say that spoke against it. And the first guy I'm going to play two clips from, he is a representative from the Fairness Campaign. And that is a group that pushes forward these fairness ordinances you maybe have heard about. And that's important for you to know that they're pushing forward these fairness ordinances and what those are, because it comes up later on. We'll talk about that here in a second. But here's kind of how he started off describing a bill that's about sexual performances. Let's go ahead.
And this bill and a lot of bills that target gay people across Kentucky are, of course, no one would ever say that explicitly. They're for protecting children.
So, in his opinion, a bill saying you cannot expose yourself to minors is targeting gay people. I mean, if I was a gay person, I would be greatly offended by that comment, because the very idea, I mean, I thought it was a far right trope that LGBTQ people and homosexual people are nothing but pedophiles who want to expose themselves to children. I thought that was a far right trope. But here is this fairness campaign that's supposed to be representing LGBTQ people outwardly stating that a bill that says, hey, you can't expose yourself to minors, like, come on, dude, is attacking gay people. Interesting for him to say that. Now, here's where it gets real rich. Here's in his argument of why this shouldn't pass, this is what he had to say. And it's just, I don't think he has any realization of what his own organization does, but here you go.
To do that in Kentucky. And you get to be in a free country. You get to be prejudiced against gay people as an individual. You get to be prejudiced against Catholics, Jews, Mexicans, black people, white people, straight people. If you want to be prejudiced, we live in a free country and you could do that, okay? But when you write it in the law.
So what's really weird about him saying that, so his claim here is that, so their argument, they're doing this weird inside-outside argument, okay? So they're saying that you can't pass a law regulating sexual performances because we live in a free country and these freedoms are great. And it's so funny how people like the people at the Fairness Campaign have no problem using the claim of freedom when it suits them, but when the claim of freedom doesn't work for them, they throw it out the window. And here's the perfect example, is this guy. The Fairness Campaign puts forward fairness ordinances. What do fairness ordinances do? They prohibit people from, quote unquote, discriminating against people based upon their sexual orientation. So basically, if you're running a kid's place and you say, I kind of feel uncomfortable or even a child care facility, and you're a Christian, and you're just like, look, I feel uncomfortable hiring transgender people to be around kids. I think it puts weird ideas in their heads. I'm against it. I think that behavior's wrong on a religious level, and forwarding it is wrong. And I think by hiring this transgender person, I'm going to be forwarding an ideology that I think is wrong. Well, with the fairness ordinances, you would have to hire that person. You would have to allow that. You couldn't not hire somebody because you're like, oh, I'm worried about how that would have, if you're a Christian coffee shop and your basis of customers are Christians, and so you're worried about how that would be, or a kid's place, and you're worried that other people have concerns about their kids being around these people because they're forwarding their ideologies. You can agree or disagree that they're doing that. It doesn't matter. What matters is your customers have concerns about, so a business may not want to. You can't actually do that. So the same guy that's sitting there saying, we live in a free country, you're free to be prejudiced against whoever you want to, is also at the same time working for an organization that pushes laws and ordinances that don't let you be prejudiced against anyone you want to. And it doesn't really matter whether you agree or disagree with his statements. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with the fairness ordinance. What matters is even he recognizes their organization he's got to recognize that the ideology of you're free and to do whatever you want, so leave us alone, doesn't actually apply in their direction. It makes them a hypocrite. It makes them pick and choose when they want to use it. It makes them trying to use this ideology of freedom and liberty to mean that you should be allowed to expose yourself to children, which is at best a misrepresentation of what freedom and liberty means. At worst is evil. But he's got no problem twisting it when it works for him. Now, here's a little bit between Rachel Roberts and the bill sponsor, Lindsay Tishner. They had a little back and forth. It's very interesting what she says here. Let's hear just a little bit of what their back and forth was.
So as long as those definitions are met, then someone could also dress in drag and read at a library. Is that correct?
Under this bill, under this provision, as long as they are not performing in a sexual manner, they could.
If I may?
Go ahead.
If someone wants to throw a charity fundraiser at a community center in a state park that would have a more traditional, perhaps maybe somewhat more, not traditional is the wrong word, I strike that. They would have a more risque performance, but it was for a fundraiser for a great local charity, but it took place at a state park. Would that be permissible?
Depends on your definition of risque.
Okay.
That is a fascinating clip for a lot of reasons, because in that clip, there's a Freudian slip where the mask comes off of this pretend world that these liberals all live in. Because Rachel Roberts, this liberal, pretending at the same time that she literally, because the con here is to tell you that drag performances are not sexual in nature. But it slips. Because what'd she say? She said a traditional drag performance. So even she admitted in there, and it slipped her mind, and she had to grab it real quick, and she panicked. She goes, I want to strike that from the record, because it came out. The mask fell for a second. And she said the thing we all know to be true, that drag performances are traditionally sexual performances, and they're wrong. And they're wrong to have around kids. So that's the first thing. And just that one little sentence, that says so much about these people's mindsets and so much about why this bill is so important and why this issue is important. And we shouldn't believe these leftists when they want to pretend that there's nothing wrong with grown men dressing as women and then doing dances in front of kids. What's your problem there? I see no problem with that. They want you to believe that. But even they know. It's in their subconscious. It's in their heart of hearts. That's wrong. That drag shows are sexual performances. Even they know that. But then she said something else. She said, oh, is it against the rules for them to have a more risque drag performance, even if it's a great local charity? Have you ever thought of, let me say this another way, okay? Would it be wrong for a person to throw a fundraiser to have strippers come in to a local state park and do performances for money, to raise money for charity, but it's for a great local charity. Is that okay? Said another way, you're like, no, Andrew, that's clearly wrong. You can't have people who take their clothes off for money coming in to a state park to do performances to raise money for charity. Are you insane? No, that's of course against the rules. But she asks it like it's a good question. Because when you say it the other way, you're like, no, of course that's wrong. And she said risque. She knew what she was saying. She's talking about burlesque dancers and everything else. She's talking about, adult performers, dancers, quote unquote, strippers. She knows what she's talking about. And she asked that question thinking like, well, that should be allowed. But when said the other way, you'd be like, no, you're crazy. And that's the thing. These people are crazy. I'm telling you. Well, y'all, coming up after this, we'll be discussing House Bill 39. We're going to have Rob, the legislative chair for the Kentucky VFW, come on and talk about how our legislature corruptness is right now putting our veterans at risk. We'll be going over that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And welcome back to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. I'm joined by Rob Holdsworth. Rob is the legislative chair for the Kentucky VFW, and he'd reached out to me and started talking to me regards to a bill, House Bill 39, that is very concerning to me. Should be concerning to anybody who cares about our veterans. Rob, thank you for joining me and taking some time to inform us on what's going on with House Bill 39.
Thank you very much for having me. So as I detailed in the email that I sent you, last year, the state of New Jersey passed some protections for veterans into their state law that essentially require folks who conduct for-profit, paid operations to assist veterans with processing their Veterans Administration, their VA claims. Folks that do that sometimes, hopefully, are very ethical and are only in it to help the veterans. Unfortunately, there have been instances where people charged excessive or unreasonable fees, and I can define that later in the discussion. And the state of New Jersey passed a law that said that if you're going to provide this paid service, you need to disclose to the veterans that you're assisting that everything that you're doing, all these services are available for free from veteran services organizations, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW, American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, AMVETS, etc. So you can, veterans can get these services free of charge from a veteran service organization. They have to disclose that that's available. And then they also, in accordance with 38 United States Code and Chapter 38 Code of Federal Regulations, they're capped on the fees that they can charge. And we can get more into the details of that. But basically, what we wanted to bring into the Kentucky Revised Statutes, what the state of New Jersey has done, which is to say that you can't charge unreasonable fees and you have to tell veterans that the services you're providing are available for free somewhere else.
Okay, and so to sum it up, I just want to make sure everybody's following along. So we have companies out there offering to help people with their veteran benefits, and they charge a fee for it. However, these same offers of helping you with those benefits are available for free through other organizations. And so the bill simply requires that those who are doing it for a fee disclose that if you don't have the money or don't want to work with them, there are people who offer the same services for free to help the veterans out. Is that accurate?
That 100% accurate.
Okay.
And I would add that the Kentucky Department of Veterans Affairs, the KDVA, also has claims agents who will provide these services for free. So if you don't want to pay, a lawyer or someone in the legal services industry, there's a government claims agent who's available to assist you through the state of Kentucky, or you can go to a veteran service organizations. Both of those are for free. And that we wanted to require these people to let people know that. And then, like I said, the biggest thing is to cap the fees that they can charge. And so in federal law, like I was referencing before, 38 U.S. Code, 38 Code of Federal Regulations, they are capped at charging 20% of the benefit that they obtain for the veteran. So the bill that we filed and that the state of New Jersey has already passed, and we emulated that in the bill that we requested. All we asked for was for the Kentucky Revised Statutes to emulate what the federal cap is on reasonable fees. And a couple of legislators took our bill and changed it to water down the disclosures so that the disclosures are not as robust as what we had wanted. But more importantly, specifically, a veteran, I'll give you a scenario. So a veteran, the VA, when they assess, how sick or injured you are, incident to service, they assign you a percentage. For instance, at one time I was rated as a 30% disabled veteran, which is pretty common. If they rate you at 100% disabled, which is to say that, your injury or your illness is such that you can't work, then there is a $3,500 a month compensation attached to that. So for a Kentucky veteran, under our bill, a Kentucky veteran who went from 0% disability to 100%, that $3,500 a month payment, let's say, for instance, it took them 6 months to process the claim, which is pretty standard. Our bringing the federal cap into that would have capped it at $4,200, what the paid claims agent could charge to this veteran for assisting with their claim. In that same scenario, that Kentucky veteran who goes from 0 to 100% disability gets that $3,500 a month benefit from the VA. They changed our bill to say that would be the agent could charge them 5 times that. That would be $17,500.
That's a pretty big. That's a pretty big difference. So the bill you put forward says, hey, look, I don't know how much work goes into assisting with the claim, but I have to imagine it is probably less than, let's say, 80 hours worth of work. I'm just grabbing a number, but the reason why I grabbed that number is because, $4,200, that's a fair amount of money. I mean, that's enough to pay even a high paid person, 2-3 weeks worth of salary. And so obviously it's probably taking less than 80 hours worth of work in order to actually get it filed and taken care of, especially if you do this. I mean, I'm sure they have some automated processes that they do. And so, but now to expand that, so New Jersey has this in place, $4,200, right? Is that what their cap is too, right?
They don't quantify it. The bill that we put into, I'm quantifying.
You're quantifying it for this example, but in this same example in New Jersey, would it be the same amount?
Yes.
Okay.
What New Jersey did and what we want to do. Go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, has these for-profit people who are helping with the claim, have they packed up and left New Jersey?
No.
So they still are making a profit then at that $4,200.
Well, that's
in
a
this
great point.
Situation.
Well, that's a great point, is that nobody at any point in this process, whether it's New Jersey, Kentucky, nationally, nobody has said that there's anything wrong with, charging a fee to assist with a veteran's claim if somebody wants to come to you. What we've said is that there's already settled law, federal law that covers this, because this is a federal process. Even the Kentucky Department of Veterans Affairs that will assist you with this, they're assisting you with a federal claim. Okay, so this is a federal process. Whether it's the Kentucky Department of Veterans Affairs, the Kentucky Veterans of Foreign Wars, Legion, whatever, that's assisting the veteran with this process, whether it's a paid claim agent, this is all federal benefits, and so it should be governed by federal law. And what we asked for was that the Kentucky Revised Statutes reflect that, so that, for instance, if what we call a claim shark, someone who charges an unreasonable or excessive fee to assist a veteran in this scenario, that the Kentucky Attorney General could pursue them under the Kentucky Revised Statutes.
Right. The only reason to pass it as a state law is to engage state resources in going after these people. And so you can be served better. It's still illegal for people to do this, but the hard part is getting them, getting the attention of the federal government to take care of it. But if you can have the attention of your state government, because it's also their jurisdiction now too, it provides more opportunities for veterans who, by the way, let's just remind everybody, was willing to make that ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms, but to protect their benefits that are offered to them because of that service that they did to our country.
Well, and in this scenario, I would add that, let's say, for instance, you got a guy who's in Tennessee. I live in Bowling Green, close to the border with Tennessee. Fort Campbell is down close to the Tennessee border. If you've got a Tennessee veteran, why would a claims agent in Tennessee be able to charge less than a claims agent in Kentucky? Why would we allow a claims agent in Kentucky to charge more than federal law allows? It makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. And so this bill seems to make a lot of sense, but you said they grabbed a hold of it. They've upped the amount, so on and so forth. We'll be digging into that. We're coming up on a break, Rob, but stay with me, because we'll keep, digging into what's going on here, because it sounds awful what they're doing, and I'd love to hear what their motivations are. But we'll have that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. We've been digging into the House Bill 39, a bill in the Kentucky Legislature dealing with the regulation of something called claim sharks, people who are charging fees to offer services to veterans to help them grab their federal benefits, but there's been a history of them charging too much, not disclosing that individuals can seek this same help for free from other places. And so there was a bill put forward, House Bill 39, that apparently mirrored some legislation over in New Jersey in order to tamp down and get the Attorney General to be able to get involved in enforcing what is federal law here in Kentucky for those of our veterans, those who have been willing to make that ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms, and to help make sure that they're protected from being scammed, from being taken advantage of. And I'm being joined by Rob Holdsworth, who's the legislative chair for the Kentucky VFW. And Rob, I know we were talking before the break, but so this bill seems straightforward, seems like something everybody should support. This is obvious. But what's happened with the bill since it was originally proposed?
A last meeting of an organization called the Joint Executive Council of Veterans Organizations, JECVO for short, JECVO. It's a collaboration of 25 veteran service organizations in the state of Kentucky, representing about 45,000 veterans. They passed out a letter from some of these for-profit claim agencies. There's a company called Veteran Guardian, company called Vet Benefits Guide, National Association for Veteran Rights. They've got, very innocuous sounding names. But they were thanking the representatives who changed our bill. And, looking into it, the only thing that I can think of is that, they want to charge more, they want to make more. I mean, it's to their benefit.
What changes did they make to the bill?
So our federal cap that we want is, 20% of what you get for the veteran. You can charge that. In the scenario that I presented, it'd be $4,200. They specifically changed that to, instead of 20% of that benefit, the quote unquote claim shark could charge up to 5 times that amount. So in that scenario that I presented, instead of the $4,200 that they could charge under federal law, they could instead charge $17,500. And that's very bothersome to me. I want to give you a little background. Down here in Bowling Green, I study to be a veteran service officer because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of law, policy, and regulation you have to know to help people effectively. And we have a man down here named PR Webster. PR is probably the best VSO in South Central Kentucky. He's a Vietnam veteran. He assisted last year over 1,200 veterans and families for free. He conducts regular in-person visits at the Butler County Extension Office, the Scottsville, Litchfield, and Franklin VFWs, the Bowling Green VA Clinic, as well as American Legion posts in Auburn, Seabury, and Bowling Green. And PR and I also visit the Warren County Jail once a month to do veterans justice outreach with incarcerated veterans to help them learn how to access their benefits, so that once they complete their sentence and reenter society, they have that assistance to make sure they don't become recidivists. So there's a public good here being provided by guys like PR Webster. And one day when I was sitting with him, we had a Vietnam veteran come in. This man is in his 70s, experiencing some health problems. And what he described to us was that, back in the 60s, he was drafted. He went to basic training. He went to Vietnam. He completed his service. He got out of the Army and never really thought about the Army or the military again. Don't have to. Did what he was asked and went back to his life. But now he's having health problems and he wants to seek help from the VA. So he came to CPR at the American Legion in Bowling Green. And as I was listening to his story, I want to protect this elderly gentleman from people who might listen to his story and say, yes, sir, absolutely, I can help you. And I'm going to take $17,500 of the benefits that I get for you. That's going to come to me and not you. And that rubs me wrong. And I want to avoid that.
Well, I
if we
mean,
can.
to kind of sum it up, what you're describing is they're offered these benefits. So in the situations we're talking about, it's things like if somebody comes along and starts seeking benefits and it takes 6, 7, 8 months for them to get those benefits, what these people are helping them with is that backdated benefits that they're owed, or the increase in benefits that they currently have, right?
Sure.
And,
Yeah, and
so that's I don't think anybody should disagree then that those benefits are owed to them based upon the benefits offered to them in compensation for, serving to protect our freedom, serving in our military, so on and so forth. It is crazy that this is being offered as a free service elsewhere. And, based upon reading the changes to the bill, so they moved it from 20% of whatever the increase is. That's where you all wanted it at. So, if the benefit increase is $1,000 a month for 6 months, then it would be $1,200 that they could charge. But they changed it to fees shall not exceed 5 times the 1 month increase in benefits. So if the increase in benefits is $1,000 and it was 6 months of $1,000 backdating, so they got you $6,000. Well, 5 times 1 month is $5,000. So they take $5,000 of a $6,000 increase in benefit. It seems monstrous. Why is it that our legislature suddenly has decided to up the caps? Why did they change the intent of the bill from protecting veterans to almost enabling a higher than federal law even attack on our veterans?
What really frustrates and disheartens me about that is that it comes down to pure Frankfurt politics. And the legal industry, the legal services industry, has a much stronger lobby, a paid lobbyist. I'm on vacation from work today. I took vacation to do this interview. I do the legislative work that I do for free. I'm a volunteer. All of us are volunteers. The paid lobbyists for the legal industry in Frankfurt have a much more influence. And what really frustrates me is, let's take, something that you've talked about on your show, the drag queen bill that just went through. The proponents, the people in favor of the drag queen bill, were given far more time in the House and Senate Veterans and Public Protection Committees than the Joint Executive Council of Veterans Organizations. JECVO got 0 time to talk about why we wanted to maintain the original language in our bill and why it should not change. We were there. We asked to speak. We were told we were going to get a chance to speak, and then they ignored us. And I do want to give a shout out though. There's one legislator, Senator Mike Wilson. He's a Marine veteran from Bowling Green. He's a member of my American Legion post. He voted no. Out of this entire process, he is the only veteran in Frankfurt who publicly supported us, and I want to give him a shout out. Mike Wilson is a good man.
Just it's unfortunate that the sacrifice of our veterans doesn't have more weight in a legislator's mind than the lobbyists coming from the legal industry, who are the ones collecting up a lot of these fees. And it's certainly unfortunate that if the veterans are sitting here saying, look, this is not good for us. And by the way, this is also federal law, that we can't get our state legislators to fall in line with that. And you bring up the point about federal law, and we don't have much time, but what's real interesting is the people who voted no and initially failed. It ended up being brought back and passed, but that was a bill regarding child labor laws. And the people against that, the people who voted no, that initially it failed in committee, voted no because they said it was more permissive than federal law. And so none of it makes sense what they're doing. But Rob, thanks for coming on. What do people need to do? They need to call their legislator and say, hey, stick with the original language of House Bill 39. Is that what they need to do?
We either need to restore the original language, which I think is very unlikely at this point, or we just need to table the bill. Yeah. And we would ask people to call 1-800-372-7181. That's the legislative message line, and tell your representative and senator to either table House Bill 39 or restore it to its original language. Also, any veteran or veteran supporter in Kentucky who wants to get involved in advocating for veterans legislation, send me an email, kyvetslegislation@gmail.com. That's KYVETS legislation, all one word, @gmail.com. And we'll add you to our database when we ask people to either support or oppose veterans legislation.
Great. Thank you, Rob, for joining me. We'll have to have you back again next time we have a piece of legislation that needs to be addressed for the veterans. But thanks for joining me. And to the rest of you, thank you all for listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We'll see you back here Monday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you then.